Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Rham Emanuel may be a Democrat in one of the most democratic cities in the world, but that doesn't mean he is popular there. The city of Chicago is falling apart in a lot of ways. You may have read it is deeply in debt, over $50 billion in debt. There were 650 murders there last year. Most of the schools are genuinely terrible. You would not send your own kids under any circumstances. So not surprisingly, polls of Chicago voters from last year showed Rham Emanuel's approval rating at about 25%. And with numbers like that, there is no chance he will be reelected next year. But like a lot of unpopular Democrats, Rham Emanuel has a plan to keep himself in power. If he can't win over existing voters, and he hasn't been able to, he can create new ones. Chicago is rolling out a new government ID card called City Key. A few months ago, Emanuel explained that City Key is intended to bring illegal immigrants, quote, out of the Key is designed to thwart federal law enforcement. The cards don't store personal information. ICE can't use them to enforce federal law, and that's intentional. Now, Chicago has announced that these cards, which were designed for illegal aliens, can be used for voter registration. In other words, non-citizen illegals will be able to vote in the city of Chicago, including in federal elections that affect you. Now, that's illegal. Congress passed a law against it. It's explicitly illegal, and yet the city is encouraging it. When a reporter asked Alderman Gilbert Villegas about this all, he made it clear he didn't care. Quote, "There's nothing stopping someone from getting a fake ID now and going to try to vote," he said. And that's true, of course, but there is a significant difference between ignoring voter fraud, which is wrong, and abetting it, which is horrifying. Authorities in Chicago want ineligible voters to vote. Now, why would they want that? As the Chicago Tribune pointed out, it's pretty simple. Rham Emanuel wants to get reelected. If it takes illegals to do so, fine, whatever it takes. We contacted the mayor's office for comment today about this. They did not even bother to respond. The Justice Department, for some reason, doesn't seem to be doing anything about any of this. And it's not just happening in the city of Chicago. In the state of California, illegal immigrants get driver's licenses, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, and they can use those to register to vote, and some doubtless do. In the state of Maryland, some towns are trying to legalize voting for illegal immigrants. How long until that's a Democratic Party platform plank? How long until some federal judge in, Hawaii declares that preventing illegal aliens from voting is racist and demands they get the vote immediately nationwide? It's coming. Of course it is. The left wants power, and this will give it to them. Chicago Alderman Amaya Pawar sponsored the bill creating the new IDs, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Alderman, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So do you support non-citizens voting?
I think there's a misunderstanding of what the City Key is. It is a library card. It's access to our mass transit. It is a municipal ID that gives people who are exiting homelessness the opportunity to present an ID where a driver's license or a state ID might be too expensive. And it also is available to our undocumented neighbors. But let me be also clear. In order for someone to register to vote, they would have to sign an affidavit and present a birth certificate, a passport, a social security card, and potentially this. So you'd still need a second form of ID. And if you defraud the Chicago Board of Elections, the Illinois State Board of Elections, and you are undocumented, you are subject to deportation. So this is not a municipal ID.
So I just want to get this on the record because you're factually inaccurate here, but I just want to hear you say it to be sure. So you're saying that in order to register to vote in the state of Illinois, you need to produce evidence of citizenship. Is that your claim?
Yes, it is. I also think it's important to recognize that what you're suggesting is that the city of Chicago, the Illinois State Board of Elections, the Chicago Board of Elections, and undocumented neighbors are all coordinating with one another.
I'm not suggesting. Well, slow down. I'm not suggesting a conspiracy, and I want to get back to my original question in just a minute, which is, do you support non-citizens voting? Because I think it'll be interesting to hear your view of that. But I'm not suggesting a conspiracy. I'm merely saying that when you let illegal aliens use this card, which was designed in part for them, and don't be disingenuous and pretend otherwise, that would be a lie, as you know. The mayor bragged about it. When you let them use this card to register to vote, when in fact you are not required to show proof of citizenship to register in Illinois, you're wrong. You have to say that you're a citizen. You don't have to prove it. You're abetting voter fraud, and you know that.
It's simply not true. I know the rules to be a voter registrar. There are laws in place, and frankly, I just don't feel like it makes sense to turn communities into the other. See, in Chicago, we like to celebrate our neighbors. We like to say that people...
Look, it's not a question of celebrating your neighbors. You can celebrate someone, appreciate them, take them to dinner, while still understanding that only citizens are allowed to vote. And so let me ask my question for a third time. Do you think non-citizens should be allowed to vote in our elections?
The federal law, state law, says that only citizens can vote. And the idea, I'm not going to sit here and play a game where we're going to demonize undocumented people.
I'm asking you very simply, what do you think? There's a federal law passed in 1996, it's in the U.S. Code, that says that non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. They're allowed to vote.
Of course.
Right.
I believe in the rule of law.
Do you believe, well, obviously you don't believe in federal law, because this city card, the ID that you made possible, is explicitly designed to prevent federal immigration authorities from enforcing federal law. So obviously you don't believe in some federal laws, but I just want to know what you think. Do you think if you could make the law, would you allow, as a theoretical matter, non-citizens to vote?
I mean, as a theory, no, of course not. I mean, we have laws in the books to make sure that citizens can vote. I just don't believe in demonizing undocumented neighbors. I don't believe in turning people into the other. That's just not how I run my office. This is not why I ran for office.
But hold on.
As the son of immigrants. Well, I'm a son of immigrants. And when I hear this kind of rhetoric...
That's irrelevant. You were born in this country. You're a citizen. So I guess the question is not, do you like all people here? That's a totally separate category. The question is there a meaningful difference between a citizen and a non-citizen? And you're trying to erase that difference. Okay. So what would be the differences? What do you think should be the differences? What should citizens get that non-citizens don't?
Well, I mean, there are lots of non-citizens, by the way, who pay taxes. There are lots of non-citizens, undocumented neighbors who serve in our army, who serve in our armed forces, who have died for both of us.
You're trying to elide past my question. Again, this is not a referendum on whether they're nice people or whether some of them add a lot. I mean, I agree with you.
Some of them have given their lives.
Okay, that is absolutely true. But I'm asking you a much deeper question, and you may not get this in your political life often, but it has to do with citizenship, which is the foundation of the country. So what is the distinction between citizens and non-citizens? What do citizens get that non-citizens don't? Why is that a meaningful distinction?
Well, citizens have access to a social security card and some more access to our social safety net. And those distinctions have always been in place, which is why people work so hard to come here, to become a part of our American fabric. This is what my parents came here. I just don't believe that, you know, these dog whistles, and I'm not suggesting you're making them. What I am saying is that people around the country...
What do you mean by dog whistle? What does that mean?
What I mean by dog whistle is that there seems to be a national rhetoric to pit poor white people against poor black and brown people.
You actually don't have that in your city? Wait, hold on. And I'm sorry that you, and I know you've got a history of race baiting, so I'm not surprised you did that. But I just want to ask you, let's be real. This is Chicago. Chicago is not a city where anybody's trying to win a lot of poor white voters. African-American voters are dissatisfied with the mayor. And everyone I know who covers Chicago politics says this is an effort to basically ignore them in favor of a new class of voters, some of them non-citizens. So it's not about whites on any level. Please don't bring it to that.
It's just not true. It's just not true. There is no grand conspiracy between Chicago elected officials, the mayor's office, the Board of Elections, and people in the city to say, let's defraud our electoral process.
So what is the city doing? Hold on, but what is the city? I mean, this is the actual foreign interference in our elections, the idea that foreigners could be voting. So you're doing a lot for illegal aliens in your city. What are you doing to prevent them from voting in elections?
So let's also be clear. There's one, evidence that the Russians' foreign influence has meddled in our elections.
Well, there's more evidence that foreigners are voting in our elections. So what are you doing about it if you care about foreign interference?
I mean, hey, I want to know why the Corbatch Commission was disbanded, because they were certainly looking for all this information about
what are you doing? You just gave an ID card to people here illegally in violation of our laws, and you're letting them use that card to register to vote. What are you doing to prevent them from voting?
My family will have that ID card, and will use it to go check out books at the library, just like someone else will. I'll use it to get on a train. I mean, this is a municipal ID.
But I'm talking about voting, which is different from all those things, but you don't want to answer the question. I appreciate it, Mr. Alderman. We're out of time. It's been 9 minutes. Anthony Napolitano is also a Chicago alderman, and he joins us now. Mr. Napolitano, thanks for coming on. So this seems, what is the city doing to make certain that people who are not allowed to vote under federal law, who are not citizens, are not voting? This seems to make it easier for them to vote, despite what the last guest just said.
Yeah, very so. You know what? First of all, thanks for having me on the show, Tucker. The funny thing about this, the way this ID is set up, is actually enticing illegal immigrants to obtain this ID. And it's doing it such that they're telling people that when you obtain this ID, any information you give us, we are going to discard it after that, which means anybody that's illegal, come and get this ID. And the hard thing for us to swallow, you know, is that the Illinois State Board of Election is actually stating that you can use this ID as a form to register to vote, and the onus is solely on the applicant to attest that they are a citizen or not a citizen.
Exactly.
So we're operating government on the hopes that people are going to follow those rules, and they're here illegally anyway. So what's our hopes are that they're going to check that box, and it scares a lot of us, and it's not what we're looking for.
So
I'm
what's
the son of an immigrant as well.
But well, there are a million immigrants. It's not a question of who's an immigrant. The question is who's a citizen. Who has a right to vote and who doesn't? And it's not about race either, obviously. So the question is, what would prevent an illegal alien, a non-citizen with this card, from voting in an election in Chicago?
Absolutely nothing, Tucker. Absolutely nothing. And here's the crazy thing about Chicago is we have committeemen that go out and they have register to vote forums, and that is going to be in a gym with maybe 200 people in there in a more comfortable setting, where checking that box that you attest that you're a citizen could be a lot easier, and all that paperwork is just sent in and you receive a voter card in the mail. This card is actually set up, if you look at it, it looks like a driver's license. It has a whole bunch of barcodes on it and a bunch of numbers on it. If all the information's thrown out on these people applying for this, what does that even come back to? Well, you're documented undocumented.
Exactly.
Residents.
And so our last guest, your fellow alderman, told us that in order to get registered to vote in Chicago, you had to produce a birth certificate. That's not true, is it?
It's absolutely not true. And then, you know what,
so that's a lie. I just want to be totally clear. That's a lie that he just told.
We actually pulled it off the computer. We pulled off a sheet as well, and you can actually fill it out online, mail it in. You check a box and you sign your name to it. That's it. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And in fact, I want to bring our previous, I don't know if he'll come back, but I just want to confront him with that, because I think, is he willing to come back? I'm asking my producer. So you just heard that. You claimed at the beginning of our segment that you had to show proof of citizenship, a birth certificate in order to register to vote, but that's not true. And I just want to be totally clear with our viewers of that. Do you want to stick with that false claim?
I read the rules and the law, so I'm not sure where Anthony Napolitano, Alderman Napolitano, is getting this information from. But clearly, there's a difference of opinion here and a difference of facts.
Okay, so but are you saying that every person who registers to vote in your state has shown proof of citizenship of the United States? Is that your claim?
People who register to vote have to show two forms of ID. One of them could be a passport, which requires you to be a citizen, a birth certificate, which shows where you're born, a driver's license, a social security card, and now you can show this as one of the two.
Oh, so you don't actually have to show proof of citizenship, because, of course, this card has none of that data on it, and a social security card can be bought down the street. I mean, that's the whole point. Right. Okay.
But you need
Tucker, just a point of clarification too, as well, is after this ID was created by the city of Chicago, the Illinois State Board of Election has come out and said that they will accept the city key as a form of ID to register to vote.
Right.
So you can go into that in there and we're crossing our fingers that you don't check that you attest.
I got it. This is voter fraud. This is the end of citizenship, and unfortunately, it's also the end of the segment because we're totally out of time. Gentlemen, thank you both for that. That was interesting. We've got an update on that gun control rally that CNN held last week.